The books that Lydia mentioned are all you can get off of here as well. These are just a few I've come up with recently. I don't know if you've seen the show 13 Reasons Why on Netflix, but I tied into that, like why is it important to talk to your kids about tech and some of the things that happened in that show, because it was a really big thing. About a year ago, it took off and like all the high school kids were talking about it. One of my blog posts is when smart homes attack, and like Alexa, and like one time we lost, remember the snowpocalypse last year where like the real freeze came? I decided to change my internet that day, and our house started getting really cold. My wife's like, why is it getting so cold? I was like, oh, because the Nest is connected to the internet. We're gonna freeze to death right now. So you gotta have internet before you have anything in life. No. And then this digital parenting bingo, which is really just kind of conversations to have with your kids around different things, around setting limits, checking browser histories, just kind of common sense things with digital parenting. This one, X-Plan, have you guys heard of this? Yeah? This is kind of cool. It's kind of a low-tech-ish thing. So the idea was, this was a dad, I think, in Maryland who came up with this. His kids were getting to the age where they're going to parties or going to sleepovers and things like that. Teenagers, they had their phones. And he wanted a way for his kids to tell him if something uncomfortable or illegal was about to happen. But they wanted to save face. So what he did with this kid is very simple. He said, listen, if something's going awry, just text me the letter X. And then what I'll do is I'll call you and say, hey, I gotta come pick you up, your aunt's whatever sick or something, I gotta come get you. And he told his kids, like, you don't even have to tell me what's happening unless someone's about to harm themselves. He says, I just wanna know that I can get you out of that situation. And then of course, kids are always on their phone, so it just seems like, he's like, oh yeah, that's going X, something's going all right. And then a few minutes later, like, oh, I gotta go home, right? So it was a way to save, and it's funny, I showed this to some parents in our community, and one mom said she uses the purple devil emoji just to make, there's like different things. There's a communication with her and her daughter to say, if you're in an uncomfortable situation, just text me that, I know, phone call coming, you're out, right? And for that parent, it's important for them to have a conversation if possible, but they also want to respect the kid's privacy and somewhat and say, I just want you out of there if something bad's about to happen, right? Or if they're doing something they shouldn't be doing. I talked about the family and media agreement. You can Google search this too. There's lots of different contracts online that are I think Common Sense Media's got a few that you could fill out actually online. And the idea again with these are, you're setting up rules with your family. This is not just for your kid, by the way. This is for the entire family. So if you tell your kids, no phones in bed, guess what that means for you? No phones in bed. It actually is good for your sleep to not do that too. You know, you want to make sure you put that away sometimes. And I would just say whenever you're creating these contracts to think about the idea of, we're trying to promote being alert. Don't make them negative, make them positive. Promoting getting along with others, online and in person, solving problems in a peaceful manner. This is always great, unless you have 3 little girls like me that like to fight about everything, so it's always a challenge, not every day is perfect. Promoting being secure and calm, like making sure they're not giving away there's some kids that are middle school that are sharing their Apple IDs with each other, just like, oh, go ahead, like, don't give away your password and your username. So having those conversations with them too about, don't just share it with your friend because you want them to download the app or whatever, just making sure they're being secure. And then of course, being compassionate and kind, just like Mr. Rogers says, kindness, that's the big thing, right? And I always tell my girls that, I was like, whatever you're doing, whether it's online or face-to-face, is it kind? Think about that before you do it. Are you being kind with your actions? And not all the time, but I'm working that into their brain so they know that when they get older, they're like, all right, is this the right thing to post? A couple other tools, these are just, again, this kind of falls between surveillance and support, but I don't know if you've seen Disney Circle. These are this is a little, and I don't work for Disney or make any money on them, but this is something a lot in our community have used, $99, and they basically just plug it in. It's kind of like Nest for internet. So this is like this certain kid, I want to see when they're on whatever devices, you know, on the internet that is. So again, balance of like surveillance and support. You don't want to get too creepy on that, but looking to see like what this certain kid is on. Now this is only the internet in your house. So that doesn't mean 3G, by the way. So if they're on 3G, you're not going to be able to see any of this. But for a couple parents in our community, they found this to be useful, especially with devices that aren't on 3G. I showed you the screen time one earlier. There's a couple other ones that are out there now. These are big hits in our community, that MyFamily one, which is really a communication app between family members. But what's pretty interesting is this. You can actually now go and like, this is crazy. You can actually set a speed limit alert. So if your kid's going over a certain speed limit, ooh, you just got an alert, you're going 80 miles an hour. Guess what? I just got an alert on my phone. So again, balance of, we don't want to over surveil, but at the same time, you could set things like, hey, I don't want you visiting so-and-so's friend's house anymore. Guess what? They always have their phone with them. When they go to that friend's house, you get an alert that they went to their friend's house because you set a little marker on the map. So I always share these as saying it's a tool, it's not parenting. It's not taking the place of parenting, but it is a tool for you. A couple other ones, this was also invented by some dads that were really looking at social media, and they wanted to figure out ways to kind of What I like about this one is it doesn't just capture every single thing your kid says on text messages or Snapchat, but it actually gives you a transcript if something is set off. Like if there's an alert about self-harm, or if there's an alert about maybe they're sharing photos that they shouldn't be sharing. I won't share it because there's some kids in the room. You know what I'm talking about though. It actually sets alerts that you then get as a parent, say, oh, well, let's see what's going on. But you can set the threshold as a parent to however tight or loose you want. So I kind of like it because it's not like looking at everything the kid's doing, it's giving them some autonomy. But if they're talking about self-harm or hurting others, you want to get some alerts for that as well before it happens. And I'll wrap up with this story. So I told you about my Aunt Gloria. I'll tell you one last thing. This picture was taken last year after my birthday. And right after, like a week later, we were walking down the street and she fell and actually broke her hip, her wrist, and a rib. 82 years old. We go to the hospital. We know that she's probably not going to come out of the hospital. So for about the next 2 months, I would visit her in the hospital every day and just kind of talk to her about things, talk about life, talk about regrets. I didn't know that she was like engaged 3 times, which is crazy. She was like that aunt with all the cats. You know that aunt, right? I have 2 theories. You either have the aunt with all the cats in your family or a drunk uncle. And if you don't have either one, you're it. No. So she's telling me these stories about regrets. And I said, what's something you regret? She goes, I always wanted to go to Machu Picchu. And I was like, really? And I was like, okay. And I look over at my backpack and I think, you know what? We're going to go to Machu Picchu. And she's like, I'm not getting out of this bed. Wait a minute. And so I pull out my iPad, and we use this thing called Nearpod in our district where you can look around. And I pull up the iPad, I hand it to her, and she's in bed, and she starts looking around. And she's like, what is this? I was like, you're at Machu Picchu. And this big grin starts to come across her face. And within about a minute, she goes, where else can we go? I was like, okay, where else do you want to go? She's like, I want to go to Egypt. I'm like, boom, now you're in Egypt. And she's looking at the pyramids. Where else do you want to go? I want to go to Mars. I'm like, okay, fine. Now you're at Mars. And they actually have the 360 photos from the Mars rover, able to look around. I think it's Arizona, but no. Looking around Mars. And for 3 hours that night, we spent with her surfing and looking all around. And I started thinking, as a teacher in the classroom, our jobs don't end when the bell rings, right? We're teachers in our families' lives. As a parent, it's the same thing. You're interacting with little ones, but you also have family members that you're working with on different things. And I didn't know it that night, but that was the last night that I would actually ever talk to her. She passed away about a week after that. But I remember thinking to myself, I was like, there's so much in life that we can do with technology if we use it the right way. And that's one thing that I want to make sure that parents know, kids know, teachers know. And I thank you guys for being a very attentive audience. And I know we went a little bit long, but I want to give you guys time for questions too. But thank you so much for letting me share that. (6:45). If you have time, you can come up and ask questions. We can, I don't know how you guys want to do that. Do you want to do questions with the whole